1970s was a strong decade for Robert Duvall, and leading into the 1980s, he was an Academy Award winner and nomination possibility pretty well for both 2 decades. But this movie is a hidden classic. I haven't seen it on television in years, but my dad and I saw this on French television before we saw it on English TV, and it really stood out because he played a character that he said once was one of his personal favorites. Now, Tomorrow came out in '72, directed by Joseph Anthony and starring Duvall. The screenplay was written by Horton Foote, adapted from a play he wrote for Playhouse 90 that was itself based on a 1940 short story by William Faulkner in the short story collection The Knight's Gambit. The PG-rated film was filmed in the Mississippi counties of Alcorn and Itawamba. Although released in '72, it saw limited runs in the U.S. until re-released in the early '80s. Duvall again has called the film his personal favorite. Now, at 103 minutes, a very, very short cast. Now, in this one, it's sort of like Grapes of Wrath meets kind of a poverty era movie. An isolated, lonely farmer named Fentry in a rural Mississippi takes in a pregnant drifter who was abandoned by the father of her child. Told in flashback 20 years later, the farmer is on a jury, and the film, narrated by the defense attorney in the case, explores why he's the lone guilty vote in the trial of a man who killed a man most people consider worthless and of no account. In a steady and methodic fashion, it is revealed the victim was the son of Sarah Eubanks, the pregnant drifter with whom Fentry had an intense personal involvement after he found her in a destitute state and nursed her back to health. She later died after he had promised he'd take care of her son. He raised the boy for a time, but the boy was taken from him by force by the brothers of the boy's mother. That's a really rough scene, by the way. Their poor upbringing led to the boy becoming a man who people held in such low regard that his murder was regarded as a public service. Fentry remembers only the child he had cherished and nurtured and can't accept his death being treated as an event with no significance. The attorney looks at Fentry and realizes that someone society treats as insignificant, but who is actually a person of tremendous character and determination, like so many others who die unnoticed. The lonely and invisible of the earth, to endure and then endure, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. A very, very small cast, only 8 key actors, with Duvall as Fentry, Olga Beline as Sarah Eubanks, Sudie Bond as Mrs. Hooley, Richard McConnell as Isham Russell, Peter Masterson as Douglas, Johnny Mask as Jackson, William Hawley as Papa Fentry, and James Franks as Preacher Whitehead. Now, the opening courthouse scene of the movies were shot at the historic Jacinto Courthouse in Elkhorn, County, Mississippi. Now, the courthouse, built all the way back in 1854, has been refurbished and is listed in the National Register of Historic Places. The majority of the film was shot in the Bounds Crossroads community of Itawamba County at the sawmill and the farm of Chester Russell, the grandfather of singer Tammy Wynette, Virginia Wynette Pugh, who lived most of her young years there with her grandparents until she married in 1960. The sawmill building where much of the film was shot was built just for the movie. Chester Russell played one of the jurors and can be seen when the jury is deliberating in the opening courthouse scenes. Some of the film props were also leased from the James Franks Antique Museum of Tupelo, Mississippi. Now, the film opened at the 68th Street Playhouse in New York City and only played 32 play dates around the States. It was re-released in June '78 at the Public Theater in New York City. It only got a limited release in Canada, mostly in French syndication, but it shows up on different revival theaters every once in a while. The film was praised by numerous critics, including Rex Reed, Gene Shalit, Archer Winston, and Jeffrey Lyons, with Reed stating it was believed it was the best depiction of Faulkner ever screened. The great Vincent Canby of New York Times overall did not care for the film, but acknowledged it was well-intentioned. The Horton Foote screenplay is less an adaptation than an enlargement in the playwright's dumbest television fake literary style of the 1950s. Tomorrow is not of Faulkner's most interesting works. Mr. Foote's attempts at pretty folk dialogue comes very close to the ludicrous. Even if the movie's intentions are decent, as reflected in an accurate look at the production, filmed in Mississippi, the effect is mostly patronizing. Now, in the annual Leonard Maltin Movie Guide, the film was rated 3.5 stars, noting that the Beline is excellent, Duvall astonishingly good, and the best ever screen presentation of the author's work. Now, interesting about Duvall was always like, and he still is in his early 90s, a very literary guy, which means He looks at every part as an expansion of his personal interpretation of the product. He acted in here. It was Robert Duvall's version of this type of character, and he doesn't do anything but play himself through the character. Now, I give an example. You look at Falling Down, the famous scene where Tuesday Weld is basically telling him he's about to retire, last day in the job, to come home, and he's kind of going like that. But Duvall, everything Duvall used to do from THX to The Godfather and stuff like that was a slow burn. And you know what's funny about Duvall? He rarely did action movies. You look at Deep Impact and some of the other, not say science fiction movies, but you know what I'm talking about. He's a very, very slow burn guy. He's probably the closest you can find to Christopher Plummer as a Canadian actor, or a great Canadian actor. Robert Duvall must have some Canadian in him or some type of literate stuff because he performs like a Canadian actor. When I say this, you know when you talk about the method, well, there's a way of Canadian acting. You know it's a Canadian actor. You look at Donald Sutherland, you look at Barry Morris, half Canadian or whatever. You look at Ryan Gosling, you look at Ryan Reynolds. There's a certain presence where they're providing information about themselves through the character. They're not giving themselves over to character. It's not completely the character, but it's Christopher Plummer as, or Donald Sutherland as, or something like that. I looked at this movie and I said to myself, this is very, on first viewing, it was kind of slow, but a second or third time I watched it, I've seen it several times over the years. It really stands out because you really don't know what Duvall is thinking. Like he's gaining the part as the movie goes along. So I like to see at the start of the movie what the takes were towards the end. I think he had the role at the end. And you know something? This movie should be redone with a very similar actor. I look at later on, which I think is the kind of the son of Robert Duvall, Ed Harris, because I see a lot of Duvall in Harris and vice versa. You know, history of violence and stuff like that. But I like these slow burn actors, and Robert Duvall, in my personal opinion, is a top 5 actor of all time. He's the most it's hard to believe I'm saying this, but he's the most underrated actor of all time, because I saw him as a 7-year-old in The Godfather. I don't know why a 7-year-old kid was allowed to watch The Godfather. The first thing when Duvall came in, when he was talking to John Marley's character, go talk to him and get the part, like The Godfather's, godson, the singer. Holy frig, he's hitting out of the fucking park, man. I couldn't believe it, how much of a good actor he was. And with Michael W. Gazzo next 2 years later in Godfather 2, where he's saying, kind of saying if you kill yourself, everything will be taken care of. And like the courtroom scene where Pacino's being questioned and, Gazzo's son are brought over to Italy to kind of put the push on him. It's just tremendous. Ladies and gentlemen, I think Hollywood and the movie industry has benefited so much from Robert Duvall. He is the icon. And even in a movie like this, you watch it and you're saying, I'm watching this movie because of Robert Duvall. Back in the day when Robert Duvall was on, like The Great Santini, you look at Tender Mercies, when The Judge, when Robert Duvall is on that poster, it made you want to go see it. One of the few actors ever of the modern era to do that much. So Robert Duvall, I give this performance 4 stars out of 5, movie 3.5, but it really, really stands out as the one of the most important forgotten movies of the 1970s. And what was kind of ironic, 1972, he was battling The Godfather. So it's a pretty weird thing. So ladies and gentlemen, if you like what we're doing with our screenshots and remote control columns, let us know what a like, comment, subscribe, or share. If you're a big fan of Robert Duvall, tell me your favorite movie. Like I said, for a lot of the people in the modern era, Falling Down should have been a Best Supporting Actor nomination. But tell me performances that really stand out for you. I think there's many out there. Thanks for listening. Bye.